Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, the 8th of March. It's just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. We're delighted to be joined by Alex Thomson, bringing us Eastern approaches from the Netherlands, and also our very own nursing correspondent, Debi Evans.
Okay, we're going to get kicked off with digital ID. I am going to label this as digital ID is here because effectively it is. We have a new version of the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill being presented to Parliament today. There's a revised version, so this is it's being marketed by the British government as the UK's post-Brexit replacement for Europe's GDPR data regime. It was first introduced last summer. It was paused in September so that, quote, ministers could engage in a co-design process with business leaders and data experts. It was then subsequently moved from the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport into the new Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Here is the bill as it was originally constituted. It's been updated, but I just wanted to have a look at the main text here. A bill to make provision for the regulation of the processing of information relating to identified or identifiable living individuals, to make provision about services consisting of the use of information to ascertain and verify facts about individuals, to make provision about the access to customer data and business data, to make provision about privacy and electronic communications, to make provision about services for the provision of electronic signatures, electronic seals and other trust services, to make provision about the disclosure of information to improve public service delivery, to make provision for the implementation of agreements on sharing information for law enforcement purposes, to make provision about the keeping and maintenance of registers of births and deaths, to make provision about information standards for health and social care, to establish the Information Commission, and to make provision about oversight of biometric data and for connected purposes. Now, this a couple of points there. Obviously, the provision about information standards for health and social care, and also the establishment of an Information Commissioner. Of course, we already have an Information Commissioner's office, but it's being changed somewhat. So let's just have a look and see what they're attempting to claim about this new digital protection and digital information, data protection and digital information bill. So it's going to introduce a simple, clear and business-friendly framework that will not be difficult or costly to implement. It's going to ensure our new regime maintains data adequacy with the EU. So maybe it's not going to be so different to GDPR after all.
Brilliant expression, data adequacy.
Yes.
Adequacy, what does that mean?
It's going to further reduce the amount of paperwork organizations need to complete. It's going to provide organizations with greater confidence when they can process personal data without consent. Now, this is an interesting point with respect to health data because, of course, people think that they can opt out of data sharing with respect to their health records. But of course, the government then turned around and said, well, actually, if it's got anything to do with coronavirus, that opt-out doesn't count anymore. And then finally, increase public and business confidence in AI technologies. We go on. They said that it was going to unleash more scientific research. As I say, it's going to reduce unnecessary paperwork. It's going to increase public and business confidence in AI, as they've already said. And then they said it's going to support international data sharing because this is about creating an international, a global data protection regime. So here's the lovely Michelle Donlan, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Co-designed with business from the start, this new bill ensures that a vitally important data protection regime is tailored to the UK's own needs and our customs. Our systems will be easier to understand, easier to comply with, and take advantage of the many opportunities of post-Brexit Britain. No longer will our businesses and citizens have to tangle themselves around the barrier-based European GDPR. So that's fantastic stuff, isn't it? Except when it comes to digital identity, and at this point, this new Department for Science, Innovation, Technology isn't saying very much about digital ID, but they do have a plan for this. It's called the DCIT Digital Identity Program, and this is what it says. In the Department for Science, Innovation, Technology, we're working to help people securely prove things about themselves, such as who they are or what their age is, without having to repeatedly present physical documents. The government is not making digital identities mandatory. They lie. This is not a step towards ID cards. They lie. Instead, we're setting robust standards to make sure private sector solutions protect privacy, boost security, enable greater accessibility, and save time and money for individuals and businesses. This is exactly the approach they're taking with the online safety bill. They're moving it onto the private sector to enforce and make it mandatory. But it's not just the private sector, because we've already mentioned the fact that government websites are going to be using the new gov.uk one login. Everybody's going to be using the same, and it's going to require this digital ID in order to access any government service. So government services, including benefits, the tax regime, even car registrations, and then the private sector, you want to open a bank account, including upcoming CBDCs, or if you want to get a job, you're going to need this ID as well. The document goes on to say that it's all about maintaining trust in digital identity products and services as uptake increases and technology develops. We're setting up a governance structure underpinned by legislation, and that's this new Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, to ensure standards are being followed and to keep them up to date. And so they're setting up an entire infrastructure for this. Private sector providers who will provide digital identity or attribute services, certifying bodies who will certify services against the standards government sets, use case schemes who are looking to build on our standards in particular use cases or industries, and employers, businesses, and other bodies, sometimes known as relying parties, who want to use digital identity services. This is all on its way. This legislation enables it. And in the meantime, of course, they've got to build the narrative. And in order to do that, they have just advertised and closed finally, because the closing date on this was the 24th of February 2023, and an identity fraud evidence-based review project in order to generate the propaganda that they need, or the data to back up the propaganda that they need to convince everybody that digital ID is a great idea. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, just coming in on your last point there, the value of the contract, £25,000 to £50,000, they're going to get nothing for that. So I would agree with you. What this is just an exercise. They want something where they can throw it at the public to say, therefore, we need all of this digital identity. Look at this survey or whatever happens. Yeah, it's coming in thick and fast. Nobody is questioning it, with the exception of the UK column. Nothing in the mainstream media, the journalists all asleep. But of course, this is going to be a net which is going to ensnare everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a government official or police or member of the judiciary. People unknown to you are going to know everything about you. That's the danger.
Yeah, Alex and Debbie, just very briefly. Alex, what are your thoughts?
This is where the Netherlands was at already nearly 15 years ago when I came to live in the country. Their version is called DigiD, or DigiD, if you use an English pronunciation. And the Dutch government used the same lie when it came in. It's not mandatory. It's just that private businesses, and indeed arms of the executive, like the people who do your driving test and your tax returns, they will have to have it, you see. So people like my mother-in-law, who's never really used a computer, cannot do their tax returns without the likes of us stepping in to help. And in the end, you could end up with major fraud that way, because if we were so minded, we could log in as her and falsify her tax return, and she would be none the wiser. This is, of course, the central lie at the heart of it all is this word of trust that's bandied about. We know who we're talking to. No, you don't. You know which identity was used to log in and do whatever transaction was at stake. And I understand there is a great carousel now of people who've been in the various parts of the underbelly of government that deal with this, revolving their way, carouselling their way into the trust and verification businesses, which is becoming a multi-billion industry as we speak. So it's another one of these self-justifying strands of propaganda, isn't it? You need this trust that we're going to sell to you at exorbitant prices because insert business case here.
Yes. Debbie, have you any thoughts?
Well, it's very interesting to hear what Alex said, because I completely back everything up that he's just said. And trust, I think you'll see later on in the news, we do come on to trust. But for me, this is all about surveillance, social credits, all of that rolling in under the disguise of digital ID.
Okay, Debbie, well, we're coming back to you in just a couple of seconds, but let's remind people of that famous Sunday Telegraph headline, Hancock's plan to frighten the pants off the public. So here was the Telegraph pushing out a huge amount of information showing that the British public as a whole simply could not and cannot trust the government, because they were They were lying about what they were doing. They were using this fear psychology in order to get people to adhere to a lockdown where people were fearful of a virus which they needn't be fearful. So can we trust the government? No. But Telegraph put a full page on Sunday, the 5th of March. Now let's have a look at Wednesday, the 8th of March. And what we can see very clearly is that the COVID story, highlighted in red towards the bottom of the screen, that is buried under the front page of what I've labelled Lineker Nazi Dross. So the Telegraph really showing its colours here, because ultimately this is all about, what is it about? It's about selling newspapers. It's about razzmatazz. This is not about the safety of the public. The headline, COVID vaccine could not be fast-tracked because of the low death rate. But that's buried under Nazi migrant jibe. So I don't think we can trust the government. I don't think we can trust the press at all on this one. I don't think we can trust many of the people in the so-called mainstream media. And Debbie, you've got a clip here from Jeremy Vine, which you found interesting.
Yes, I caught this on Jeremy Vine, and I did think it was interesting because, you know, once you see one lie, you start to see more lies. So let's have a look at the clip and see the reaction of somebody that has obeyed all the rules. Let's see what he says.
So this is the where it all started, where the anger over these WhatsApp messages started, because Hancock, clearly suggests you use the new variant, which was the Kent variant, end of 2020, to frighten the pants off everyone. He says we've got to frighten the pants off everyone with a new strain. When do we deploy the new variant? Almost like it's a deliberate calculation. And I want to bring in somebody, friend of the show, Graham Taylor, who took the lockdown rules very seriously. And last night you got in touch, Graham, and you said you were absolutely disgusted.
Jeremy, I'm on the verge of tears with anger. I'm not usually an angry man, but, you know, Matt Hancock, if you're watching this, you are responsible for putting the nation into fear. I did everything you asked for. I took your jabs. I stayed in at home. I didn't go to the pub. I stopped my family life. The kids didn't go to school. Their education suffered. And you've done this. It's a psychological operation against the people of this country. Jeremy, I'm just appalled. I've always supported the government. You know, I, as a police officer, I was always told to obey orders, and I did. I've done everything in life to do what the government wanted. And now I don't trust them. And, you know, the conspiracy theories of 2020 are all turning out to be true. And for Matt Hancock to say something like he will block funding for children, it's just immoral. And the man should be put before the bar in Parliament, and if not prosecuted, because this is horrendous. It goes deeper and deeper. And what will more revelations show as time and history, you know, turns on? What happened in that time? You know, I lost 2 years of my life, and I am very, very angry, Jeremy.
So had he not done his psychological operation, as you describe it, you might not have gone into the deep lockdown you went into. Is that right?
We wouldn't. We sat in fear when Boris Johnson came on the television and in his Churchillian speech, you know, said what we all had to do to save the NHS. And the NHS has been good for me. They saved my life on more than one occasion. And we thought it's our duty to do this. Yet COVID was nothing more than a respiratory infection. More people were dying of the flu. We weren't told this. We were told that this was a killer disease and many hundreds of people were going to die. And we were shown the figures every day of deaths. And yet a lot of the COVID deaths are now, you know, being told that they were from other things, and COVID was maybe just a contributing factor. You know, we were told Matt Hancock will put a protective ring around old people's homes, and he didn't. He just let them die. You know, and we went along with it all. We were conned. We clapped for the NHS. And really what's coming out now, that this was just a political game. It was an exercise in population control. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm starting to believe a lot of what they are saying is true. And I'm a very angry man.
Thank you very much, Graham Taylor. Thanks for getting in touch last night. I was amazed. Graham's message was, you know, as you can see, really heartfelt, Gemma.
And there you can see a very angry and passionate man, but no mention about the people that have died. And what will future revelations show? Will they highlight those that are vaccine injured? Will they highlight those that have lost their lives through the vaccine? And will they highlight the people that lost their lives through midazolam and morphine? What will future revelations show? But clearly the conspiracy theories that we were allegedly throwing out in 2020 are not conspiracy theories. And let's remember, a conspiracy theory is only a conspiracy if it's not real, and this is real.
Yep, thank you, Debbie. Well, just to correct you, that gentleman did actually say, and they died. He did mention that people had died, but never mind Jeremy Vine, the guest there clearly motivated and realised that he's been conned. But what about Jeremy Vine himself? Let's have a look back in April 2021 to this clip to see a very different Jeremy Vine.
Here's a free home COVID test. From Friday, everyone can access 2 per week. This is a big story today. You'll be able to get them at testing sites, pharmacies, and sent through the post. You won't need to return them to a lab. These are lateral flow tests that give you a result in just 30 minutes. The Prime Minister and Health Secretary say they hope the testing will help to squash any COVID outbreaks as we start to ease our way out of lockdown. So the idea is we get them and we take them, because it goes wrong if people refuse. And I wonder, Jenny, what you think, whether it's selfish to refuse.
I think there's probably lots of reasons people are going to refuse to take these tests. I mean, some of it will just be fear about what they find afterwards. I think some of it could be about allergies. Some of it could be genuine health problems, and so they can't take those tests. I think it would be wrong to call it selfish. Some people could refuse through ignorance and denial of the damages that are happening in society with the pandemic. So I wouldn't self.
Not selfish. Okay, Sarah has a test here. You know, no allergies to that, are there?
No allergies. If you've got, for instance, we did hear a couple of weeks ago a father whose child's got severe learning disability and behavioural problems and just can't be pinned down for it, and that I think is a problem. But
I've got an allergy to people sticking. Well, I've got an allergy to people sticking stuff up my nose. I've discovered, and if that's, I honestly, I do not want that to happen again.
Well, this
happened over Christmas.
This is so easy to do. It really
Go on,
is.
show us.
It comes in a box like that. You've got your instructions there. I've got all my kit, got my tissues, got my sanitizer, would be washing my hands normally. Basically, a little bit of liquid comes in there, open it up, pop it into this pot there. The box even comes with a stand, so you can pop your box in there. That's your testing thing.
Right. Are you going to test yourself now?
I am going to
Go on,
test myself now. So I'm going to blow my nose.
Okay.
Gently and in a ladylike manner.
Okay.
Oh, that was very
That was very
ladylike.
ladylike. Nothing
That
lazy.
wasn't from your toes, that one.
It's not from my toes. I would normally wash my hands for at least 20 seconds, but I have washed my hands just before I came in, so I'm going to sanitize them instead.
All right.
And then I'm not doing this quite properly for speed. So then you take the swab. The swab comes out really easily. You take this, you open the end here, and you do not touch. This is the non-cotton bud end. You take out that end, and all you're doing is use a torch. Very easy to do. Just open your mouth, don't touch your tongue, and you're going to pop it in.
Use a torch.
Yep, so that you can see. Use a mirror and a torch so you can see, and you don't touch your tongue. Pop it on the back of your throat. 4 rubs on each side, so like this. And then pop this in there, 1 nostril only, till you meet some resistance, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to sneeze. 8, 9, 10.
So utter hypocrisy by Mr. Vine, because basically here he is promoting the scam and delivering it, as Mike has just said to me, in a manner for children. And what is anybody who dared challenge what was going on labelled as selfish, ignorant, or in denial? So utterly disgraceful. If Jeremy Vine had done his job and listened to alternative viewpoints at the time, he might have been one of the journalists who would have meant that we're not in the mess that we're in now, or suffered as we did in lockdown. But of course, that procedure, Debbie, was also medically incorrect, because she was using the same swab for her mouth and her nose, if I understand that is wrong.
Oh, honestly, Brian, there were so many things that were wrong with that clip. Number one, I was an ENT nurse, and there's no way that I would have performed a nasopharyngeal swab like that. You never ever use both sides of the throat, then shove something up the nose. It's a really delicate procedure. It's an invasive procedure. It's not something that members of the public should do. Only trained, as I was on an ENT ward, it was only a senior doctor, a senior registrar, or a consultant that would do that. And if we had to do it, we would do it with supervision, because the head has to be tilted back at a certain angle. This is dangerous. There's a little structure at the top of the nose called the cribriform plate. We've talked about it before, but there's so much wrong with that clip. The irony, the hypocrisy, it just leaves me feeling cold. And I remember when it went out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Debbie. Well, take us on to the subject of WhatsApp, which of course is the meat of the Telegraph's exposure about all matters to do with government communications around COVID.
Yeah, so I'd just like to throw out a few of my observations, and most people will know I'm not tech-minded or orientated at all. So these are a few of my observations. So I'd really appreciate some comments, because I'm sure that if we're getting leaked WhatsApp messages on lockdowns, then there should be plenty of WhatsApp groups and WhatsApp messages that we could facilitate ourselves or see with regards to the vaccine injured, vaccine injuries, and serious adverse reactions, amongst other things. So I decided just to look at WhatsApp, because why are we doing everything on WhatsApp? So when you go to Wikipedia, you can see that WhatsApp is now owned by Meta. So this is a private company. So when I jumped to look at Meta to make sure who was controlling Meta, amongst others, of course, we've got Mark Zuckerberg, and we've also got Nick Clegg, who's president of Global Affairs. So it's like, well, how safe is WhatsApp? And I just did, like I say, I'm just throwing out some observations here, because I just did a very quick search online, and this is what I found. I found out that WhatsApp might not be as safe or secure as we possibly think. And this article from the Reader's Digest says that experts would never have these apps on their smartphones either, because there's security issues. So that led me to go and have a little bit more of a deep dive. Well, it wasn't really that much of a deep dive, to be honest, because if you just put in WhatsApp and hacks into a search bar, you find other sites. And these are just a few examples. So it would appear, and as I say, I'm not an expert, so I'm going to especially throw this over to Mike, Brian and Alex, but it would appear that it's not that difficult to hack WhatsApp. But it's not just government business that seems to be conducted on WhatsApp. It seems that there are many, many areas that are, including the police. And recently, this article from Sky News came up to say that Wayne Couzens had joked about sexual assault in newly released WhatsApp messages. So I'm thinking to myself, why have we not brought this subject up about how secure is WhatsApp, and should we be conducting government business on WhatsApp? So I decided to look and see what the BBC had said, and the BBC produced an article. You can see it here. Ministers face High Court battle over WhatsApp use. The government could be forced. Sorry, Brian, do you want to just interject there?
Yeah, sorry. What struck me from looking at the screen here in the studio is the date of that BBC headline is the 26th of October 2021. So effectively, this is in the middle. This is in the middle of all the various goings on. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's absolutely right. So they knew this has been an ongoing situation for a while. And I'd like to open it out to Alex as well, because, you know, we've got GCHQ, we've got MI5, we've got Porton Down. Are all these people using WhatsApp and WhatsApp groups? Because as I went and looked a little bit further, I could see that it wasn't just governments, it was actually scientific experts. And we can see that Chris Whitty, he's been leaked on the WhatsApp messages, Boris Johnson WhatsApp messages, and now we've got a row going on within the Labour Party about WhatsApp messages leaked with Sue Gray. So WhatsApp messages seem to be extremely important. So then I bought the newspaper every day, the Telegraph, to see what they're printing. And part of what alerted me a little bit was this comment on the lockdown diaries saying Bill Gates owes me one, says Minister. And I thought I'd just check to see what contact Matt Hancock has had with Bill Gates and if there could be any truth around this. And of course, we can see that Matt Hancock's very proudly standing with Bill Gates at the WEF. So there's a lot more. And I think if we look in a little bit deeper as well, and this is going back to my deep dive, and this is something that I would like your comments on, because I photographed this. I'm sorry it's so dark, but I highlighted it from Nadim Zahawi. And he says, I am going to talk to Pascal. I have appointed, I know that, sorry, you might have to read that because it's a little bit
So it
small
says,
for me
I'm
in
not,
that bottom left box.
Yeah, it says, I'm not going to talk to Pascal. I know that SI have approval, World Health Organization emergency approval as of February 15th, so they can distribute those doses to many countries in need, including India, all in desperate need. We expect to have 17 million in March and April, and 18 million in May, 21 million in June, 23 million in July. So enough to vaccinate all adults twice at faster pace than we're doing now. I'll make a personal decision based on the ministerial decision. I don't need any other information.
Thank you. 2 points there. Obviously, that goes back to the front page of the Telegraph today to say that not enough people were dying, which was basically why the vaccine rollout wasn't fast. But also, who's Nadim Zahawi talking about there? Because he mentions Pascal. So I don't know whether I'm joining the right dots. I'd be very open to everyone's interpretation, but could he be referring to Pascal Soireau, the chief executive of AstraZeneca? Because then I looked and saw that they were very good friends. And in a tweet, Nadim Zahawi has indeed congratulated his friend and fellow team member, Sir Pascal Soireau. I'm sorry for the pronunciation there. I'm sure Alex will correct me. So you just have to ask yourself the questions. And when you're looking at these articles, look at the WhatsApp messages and see what else is within them that perhaps the Telegraph or other people may have missed. So I'd welcome your comments on WhatsApp, but it seems as though we're doing all our business on WhatsApp. So surely there's vaccine injuries on WhatsApp?
Yeah. Debbie, I'd just like to reinforce that Zahawi tweet there. Huge congrats to my friend and fellow team member in the greatest vaccine deployment effort in history. Arise, Sir Pascal Soireau, if that's the right pronunciation. So this is glowing praise for something which has been carried out on the back of a complete lie to the British public, indeed the world public. Alex.
Well, hold on, just before I just want to make a couple of points about WhatsApp. First of all, Debbie, the first point is that one of the things that we've been wanting to highlight and trying to highlight over quite a period of time now is the concept of dual use. We're finding that government, intelligence agencies, defense are using civilian infrastructure for the communications. This is part of the reason why Chinese companies have been thrown off the 5G networks and the telecommunications networks. It's part of the reason why there's a keenness to get rid of TikTok and other Chinese software that might also be on phones. So no matter what you think about the safety of WhatsApp itself and its encryption, the fact of the matter is we're seeing all this dual use being openly encouraged within government. And of course, where did this start? Hillary Clinton's emails. You know, the fact that she was doing government business on her own personal email server broke the idea of, Alex, and I'd be interested in your comments on this. This broke the idea of any kind of accountability because there was no way to track and trace what she was doing, who she was speaking to, what agreement she was making.
That is the heart of it there, Mike. I'm afraid the pronunciation stumped both Brian and Debbie. It's Soireau. But let's talk about classified information, really, because that's the heart of it. The whole point is that all that was being bandied about in that WhatsApp group was not classified information. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was proper to be discussing it there, because this group included a top civil servant, Sir Simon Case, and government ministers who are also parliamentarians, of course. Are they speaking as the executive? Are they speaking as government? It's very hard to tell. When laptop and mobile device communication really came into its own in the decade of the 2000s, when I was a GCHQ officer, the fiction was still conveniently maintained in the first decade of the introduction of this technology that ministers wouldn't really use it except when they were really on the hoof and would just receive a very quick tip-off of some intelligence or other classified matter, and then they would go back to their open network communication at unclassified level, and it was up to them if they mentioned any political sensitivities, but definitely not anything that was government business. Of course, that has gone by the board. One of the foreign secretaries in that era managed to, with the wrong press of a button, wipe the encryption, or crypt as we call it for short, off his mobile as soon as it was issued to him. So there's user error as well there. The heart of it, of course, is that government ministers, although they're operating on behalf of the Crown, and although they're enabled by quite secure health agencies, Porton Down, UK Health Security Agency, and indeed intelligence services, and although these services give them dedicated terminals, laptops, mobiles, or software and hardware to clamp onto one of these devices for the purposes of a secure conversation, their milieu these days is swimming around with lobbyists, with senior civil servants, with anyone who's brought into the club as a SPAD, a special advisor, and there is quite properly by design no secure system for discussing things with those people, because only open source material is supposed to be discussed with such people.
Yeah.
Well, I just find it incredible, I have to say, go back to Cold War days when communications were so, carefully guarded, and secret documents had to be confidential, secret, and above documents were very carefully handled. And suddenly we've now got MPs just conducting their business over, public communication systems. So is this an accident? I don't think so. But of course, the MPs are too stupid to understand what they're involved in. I'll say most of them are too stupid.
Alex, let's go to Portugal.
This is just to remind viewers that Debi has interviewed, and it's up on the homepage at the moment, the remarkable dental surgeon, Dr. Marta da Silva Gameiro in Fatima, a town well known for the apparitions. She is single-handedly, as described in this interview, campaigning for Portugal to have a referendum on whether it should join the WHO pandemic treaty, which Mark Anderson has been reporting on for us. Last time I was on, not Monday, but last week, we covered that in a segment and showed also her Portuguese language channel on Odyssey, the video sharing service, which UK Column also uses, where she had given her testimony as she needed to, appearing before the Petitions Committee so that they could decide whether to process and forward on her petition to the plenary of Parliament. I thought it would be interesting for viewers to see, with reasonably good automatic English subtitling, just a little bit of Dr. Gameiro's defence of herself in this committee. Not the opening statement that was read from a script, and that was perhaps not the most enticing thing for people to listen to. But here, after several members of Parliament who belong to the Portuguese Parliamentary Petitions Committee have asked polite but sceptical questions of her, why are you doing this? She gives a lively, polite defence of herself, revolving around a very important point, which is that the World Health Organization is part of the United Nations, and the United Nations founding principles need to be respected. Her grievance, which she says she's perfectly entitled to bring to people's attention, is those currently in the EU and the UN at the top are not suitable people, even judging by the founding principles enunciated in the founding charters and treaties of those organizations. So those listening in audio only will hear her speak Portuguese, and those watching in video will see, I stress, they're not human, but they're reasonably good automated subtitles of what she's saying at this point.
Vou começar por a observação de ser necessário fazer uma declaração de interesse. Eu entendo que, como cidadã, tenho todo o direito de ter uma opinião. É verdade, tenho. Mas o que eu vi nos últimos 3 anos foi ser qualquer coisa que eu dizia contra o modo como estava a ser escolhida a gerir a pandemia Covid-19. Eu era acusada de negacionista, era acusada de extrema-direita, era acusada de ser anti-vacinas e que queria matar os avózinhos. pelo amor de Deus, de maneira... Eu sei que foram tempos caóticos e que quando há caos tendem-se a extremar posições e fazer declarações que muitas vezes são mais impulsionadas pelo medo do que propriamente por uma razão racional. No entanto, eu sinto necessidade, cada vez que vou falar sobre isto, de fazer esta declaração, porque eu, como profissional de saúde, o que eu tenho que pôr à frente é o interesse dos meus pacientes e respeitar o princípio básico. Eu sou médica dentista, não fiz o juramento de Hipócrates. No entanto, também tive todas essas disciplinas na universidade e a primeira coisa que nos ensinam é primo non nocere, primeiro não fazer mal. E desculpem-me, mas não foi isso que foi feito durante a gestão da pandemia. E eu acho que tinha o direito de falar sem ser acusada de ser extremista. Pronto. Cooperação nacional necessária, se eu acho que ela é necessária. Eu acho que eu sou perfeitamente a favor da União Europeia e das Nações Unidas. Eu sou uma pessoa, eu nasci nos anos 80, eu cresci com a União Europeia, estou completamente dentro do sistema. Agora, por eu acreditar que precisamos de haver cooperação entre países, não quer dizer que eu não questione quando vejo que o objetivo se está a desviar do seu objetivo original. As Nações Unidas foram constituídas após a Segunda Guerra Mundial com o objetivo de cada cidadão nasceu igual, com iguais direitos e responsabilidades. Quando eu vejo que os objetivos iniciais primordiais estão a ser desviados, eu acho que nós temos que questionar. Não estamos a questionar a instituição, nós estamos a questionar as pessoas que estão a dirigi-las.
I am not questioning the institution's right to exist, says Dr. Gameiro. I'm questioning the people at the helm of the institution who are forcing through pandemic treaties in this case. I refuse to be called a denier or an idiot just because I have questions. That's why I'm sitting here before you in Parliament. And although they didn't administer the Hippocratic Oath to me because I'm a dentist, she says, it's sufficient that at university I learned that the basis of all healthcare is first do no harm, primum non nocere. And she's quite right on that. Moving on to France, the Epoch Times, in its French brand, has had an extremely interesting interview here about a new book which has been written by somebody who's rubbed shoulders with the French deep state. The book title is Le Clan des Seigneurs, meaning the clan of bosses or lords, overlords. The author is Paul-Antoine Martin, who as an engineer found that he had a lot to do with the great and the good or not so good in the French deep state. He's given a candid interview. The link will, of course, be in the show notes. As usual, people will be able to turn on English subtitling, which will be very accurate because they're from typed French subtitles, not automated. And here he's describing how, in the clip we're about to listen to, there are three bodies, corps, as they're called in French, that control the senior French civil service. So the equivalent to the senior executive service in the USA or the First Division Association in the British Civil Service. Of course, the French are a bit older and grander in most of these things, so they've got these bodies. Since the 1970s, they've had the ENA, the École Nationale d'Administration, people might have heard of, where it's actually instead of university, people go to a special fraternity and learn to be a gorgeous senior civil servant. There are two more technical, lesser-known bodies that Martin rubbed shoulders with. One is the Corps des Ponts, one is the Corps des Mines. Technically, they deal with infrastructure, as the name suggests, bridges and mines, but basically they have transport all sewn up. He first crossed them when he said he was applying for a particular job at a port as an engineering expert who wasn't a French civil servant, and he was told, no, this job is reserved for our fraternity, but you won't see that on paper anywhere. Just don't think about applying, chum. In this section, which again, if you're listening in audio, you'll hear French, but it's subtitled in very good English for those viewing, Martin describes the source of power of the French senior civil service.
Donc il y a une fraternité très forte entre eux et l'impression qu'ils se sont constitués une sorte de citadelle avec des remparts très clairs. Ce qui est assez curieux, ce sont des gens de pouvoir mais qui se protègent. Voilà, donc il y a cet antagonisme assez étonnant. Alors quel est leur véritable pouvoir? Moi je dirais qu'il est extrêmement fort. Extrêmement fort puisque ils occupent toute la strate décisionnelle de la grande administration. Donc ils ont les rênes du pouvoir, on va dire exécutif, ou ont le pouvoir de faire sur tous les pans de l'administration. Et ils sont sur le temps long. Ce sont des gens qui font carrière et qui vont rester dans leur poste plusieurs années et qui vont rester dans le giron en fait de l'administration à laquelle ils appartiennent ou au pan de l'administration à laquelle ils appartiennent. Et donc ils ont le temps d'influencer très largement le fonctionnement de cette administration et les décisions qui sont prises. Ils sont au contact direct, donc la strate du dessus, c'est le politique, qui lui, donc c'est le cabinet ministériel, c'est le ministre, et puis au-dessus, c'est la présidence. Le politique, lui, va construire une politique qu'il souhaite étendue sur l'ensemble du pays, mais pour étendre cette politique, il faut passer par les rouages de l'administration qui, elle, est chargée de mettre en œuvre la politique. Et c'est là que l'articulation peut être plus ou moins fluide, plus ou moins rouillée. Je rappelle, d'ailleurs c'est étonnant, Elisabeth Borne, notre première ministre, a publié une circulaire en décembre dernier, rappelant avec beaucoup de force, oui, beaucoup de force, on va dire ça comme ça, tous les hauts cadres de la fonction publique, en leur rappelant qu'ils ont l'obligation d'appliquer au plus vite les décrets une fois qu'ils sont signés. Donc, on comprend que ce n'est pas le cas. Voilà. Et dans cet écart-là se crée, évidemment, le pouvoir qu'ils peuvent avoir de résister à une politique, de la transformer, de la ralentir, de l'empêcher, parce qu'il y a tellement d'arcanes dans une administration qu'une décision peut facilement se perdre.
Highly insightful stuff, because what Martin is saying is that there's this gap, écart as he calls it, between policy implementation from the president, or in other countries it would be a monarch, through the ministers who are accountable to parliament. When it gets to the senior civil servants, they can hold it up, they can denude it of power, they can water it down, and their allegiance is to themselves, to their own giron, as he calls them, their own flock. They stay. Ministers come and go. One quotation from the book we'll bring on screen here is where his slightly thinly fictionalized character, Schlumberger, actually the same name as an oil company, but Schlumberger is this character who embodies the values of the senior civil servants. And he says that the author says that after a significant pause, Schlumberger finished his speech with these impassioned words: "Gentlemen, in our country, we have 50% losers, 45% mediocrities, and 5% elite. And we are the elite of the elite." Let's have a look at a viewer's comment as well, somebody who knows France very well. Apologies that it's grainy, but I had to take it from a messaging app of the kind we know is not secure. For those who want to have a guide to what Martin is saying in the whole video, if they wish to watch it with English subtitles, which you'll find from the settings cogwheel and then go to auto-translate on YouTube. Around a quarter of an hour in, Martin says that technocracy has mastery of politics, like a spider leads the fly in its web. Then he talks about the public, even in France itself, not knowing about this ENA, the École Nationale d'Administration, and its two smaller counterparts. The problem for this viewer is that the French have until now accepted that they are ruled by the elite. And the viewer refers to Hofstadter's work on power distance, meaning that the French actually, despite, perhaps because they get shirty sometimes in reaction against it, they tolerate being ruled from on high much more than the British do. However, says this insightful viewer who's now back in Britain, we have some problems of our own. Although we have less tolerance for people lording it over us, we are less egalitarian. This is why we should join with the French, says the viewer, and combine our British intolerance of haughty bosses with their proletarian power, manifesting as it's called in France, demonstrating. It will have to be the Brits that follow through to demand any real change. The viewer then says that around the half-hour mark, Martin points out that the French system has been based on sycophantic behaviour among a small group of powerful people for so long, just think of Sir Simon Case and his ministerial chums in that WhatsApp group, that the French have a mature understanding of the phenomenon from which we can benefit. And at 40 minutes, the state of the super elite is more baked in for France than the UK, largely through this system of grande école or elitist training schools, a bit like British Oxbridge training. But it's reinforced and enabled by the tolerance of the populace. Nevertheless, The crystalline nature of technocracy in France has much to show us in other countries as the kernel of technocracy and of soulless tyranny. A final observation by Martin, which this viewer highlighted, is that the system deliberately promotes mediocrities in order to create a debt of gratitude. I have a couple more in my segment, but I wonder whether Mike and Brian wish to come in, because what Martin is saying here reflects quite a lot of the insights that we've developed at UK Column over the years, especially in dealing with unaccountable senior public servants.
Exactly, Alex. Well, unaccountable politicians mixing with unaccountable civil servants, and of course unaccountable global business leaders all mixed together in these partnerships. It's a network which is driving policy. But of course, the other bit, which is always left on the sidelines, is that we're not just dealing with people using normal language to coerce people into adhering to their policies, or misleading them where they want to take people's eye off the ball. We've now got the political use of applied psychology in order to get people to do things which they would not necessarily do if they were thinking in their normal frame of mind. This is the danger, and my mind goes back, Mike, to the exposure that the UK Column did on the work between the French government and UK government in Cameron's time, where the French expert Oliver Willier came to the UK in order to help the Behavioural Insights team learn how to con the UK public even better. But, you know, this is an excellent clip, but there's so much more to be said about this use of dangerous political applied psychology.
And where does this leave French foreign policy, or indeed the foreign policy of other Western countries? Well, a clip we're about to see will enunciate that quite well. It's a press conference that was just held with unexpected fireworks between Félix Tshisekedi, who was hosting it in Kinshasa, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Emmanuel Macron. Of course, there's two Congos. It's the one across the river, Congo-Brazzaville, that used to be the French colony, but they still have French, of course, as the language of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is even more astonishing, bearing that in mind, what you're about to see, because Tshisekedi is not even ticking off his own former colonial master. He's ticking off the French as an embodiment of general Western arrogance. And of course, being a French-speaking country, he gets Macron visiting. You won't find the clip we're about to see in the mainstream news. It was from Saturday, the 4th of March. While you're listening to it, you won't hear the French original because it's quite hard to get this clip. And for better English subtitling, I've gone for a version which is overdubbed in Arabic. But if presuming people don't speak Arabic, most of our viewers, just watch the subtitles. Tshisekedi springs a surprise for Macron here in the clip you're about to see. Macron blithely assumes that the reason he's being told off for paternalism is because the French press said something about the opposition, that Macron then grandstands in a bit that's been cut out of this clip and says, "My dear fellow, you must understand we have a free press." The same stuff that you hear, the same guff you hear from the Germans when they are asked about their relationship with Russia. The foreign minister there, Baerbock, made a similar gaffe recently and said we have free press, Pressefreiheit, which she mispronounced as Fressefreiheit, meaning freedom to guzzle. No, Macron didn't get off that easily, because it wasn't that had annoyed the host, President Tshisekedi. It's the fact that the recent former foreign minister, Jean-Yves Le Drian, had blamed the Congolese, or by extension the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, for its own poverty, and thus was being paternalistic. Watch the clip.
أن يتغير في طريقة التعاون مع فرنسا وأوروبا، أن تنظروا بشكل مختلف إلى أفريقيا وأن تحترمونا، وليس أن تنظروا إلينا بلهجة أبوية ونحن المخطئين وأنتم.
Je voudrais
Tshisekedi
أود
أن أعلق على التعليق. عندما يطرح صحفي فرنسي سؤالا فهذه ليست فرنسا، لا ينبغي أن نخلط بين الأمور.
Non, mais c'est pas une position de la France. Parce qu'il y a plus, il y en a eu.
أنا كنت أشير إلى ما قاله لو دريان وزير الخارجية.
Mais cette formule, président.
Oh dear, doubly embarrassing for Macron there. And in a bit that was spliced out of that edit, Macron actually started deploying the cheesy line, which you sometimes hear when you have a difficult conversation at work and people get shown up, when they say, it's good we're having this conversation, it's nice to get it out in the open, isn't it, when they mean anything but. And that's exactly what Macron said. It's nice to have this game of ping pong with you, President Tshisekedi, to get this out in the open. But it wasn't, because Tshisekedi had another blast of his blunderbuss in store regarding who'd actually said this paternalistic remark. One more from me from the Netherlands, because the natural terminus of this horror of unaccountability in the senior civil service is child abuse. Joris Demmink has long been accused, of a retired, very senior former Dutch civil servant, of child abuse. He's been through trials and he's now got a lifetime immunity from prosecution on the matter, so I'll tread carefully. De Andere Krant is a truth newspaper in the Netherlands, which has picked up on a very recent parliamentary commission reporting on this, I would say, awful man, but that's just my personal view, because he was the top civil servant at a ministry for years in the Netherlands. The Turks accused him of molesting children when he was on official visits there. Now, with the election of members of parliament of the Forum for Democracy, which are not afraid to take these matters on, one of their members of parliament, Gideon van Meijeren, has described the recently released Hendricks Commission report on the whole issue of organised ritual child abuse. The Dutch press are calling it that now, at least the free press are. He calls it an investigation for show and striking the face of all the victims. The title of the report itself is, this is a very Dutch-style title, Between Unbelief, Support and Detection. The Commission decided that there is organised and very violent abuse of children in the Netherlands, but we cannot prove that there are active networks that abuse children in any ritualistic or Satanist manner. Von Meijeren didn't take this halfway house. He said in a parliamentary debate in the 19th of January, of course there is evidence of Satanist ritual abuse. Look at Lisa, and then quote somebody who's been on Dutch radio, mainstream radio, for having been a victim at the age of 15, and then points out Demmink is the natural terminus of this accusation. And then the paper goes on to remind people that actually members of the US Congress in 2012 wrote in a letter to the EU that they doubted whether the Netherlands, a key state for these matters, was actually able to tackle child abuse and what's called here child pornography, best described as footage of child abuse, because Demmink was in a very high position. And that the tolerance that the Dutch government had for a pederast club called Martijn was very much worrying the Americans as well. The current state of affairs, as I understand it, is that the Dutch prosecutors, the OM, the Openbaar Ministerie, have a policy paper in place that as soon as an accusation is made that abuse was of a Satanist nature, it will be blocked from being prosecuted. So that's a very convenient way for the Dutch government to insist that there is no SRA going on in the country.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Let's come back to the UK then. And of course, Rishi Sunak has been hosting a press conference yesterday, all about his the fifth of the 5 priorities, which is about stopping the boats. So let's just briefly have a look at what we're pushing out on the Number 10 Twitter feed today. So this is the illegal migration bill has been announced. It's going to stop. If you come to the UK illegally, you will be stopped from submitting spurious claims to frustrate removals. If you come to the UK illegally, you'll be banned from ever claiming asylum in the UK. If you come to the UK illegally, you'll be denied access to the UK's modern slavery system. And if you come to the UK illegally, you'll be detained and removed to a safe country in weeks. Well, I'm just going to focus on this last one for now, because the question is that a realistic claim that they would be able to achieve? Let's have a look at this from the Migration Observatory at Oxford University. This is their Q&A on the UK's policy to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, because this is a safe country that they're talking about. 10th of January 2022, this was published. They say there's no cap on the number of people who will be transferred. However, initial news reports suggest that the Rwandan facility currently has the capacity to house around 100 people at once and process the claims of up to 500 occupants per year. Okay, last year, or in 2020, sorry, the UK, they say, made around 19,000 asylum decisions. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to manage to do that. But anyway, let's check and see whether this is correct. Let's look at the UK government official statistics, irregular migration to the UK year ending September 2022. When we look at it, roughly around January, September 2022, 40,000 detections at the UK border by method of entry. This is this graph. So the number of detections was around 40,000, and around 34,000 of those were coming across in small boats. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to ship all those back out to Rwanda when Rwanda doesn't have the capacity to take them. But I just wanted to have a look at who are the people that are coming at the moment. And if we look at the nationalities arriving via small boats, we can see that by far the largest grouping that's coming by small boat in 2022 is from Albania. We've talked about this before, and we've talked about the British involvement in Albania, particularly Tony Blair and Cherie Blair and so on. But let's, they're talking about putting some money into this, Alex, to get people back out of the country. They're saying that that people will not be able to access modern slavery facilities and so on. This has had a response from the UN, who have said that this is deeply unfair and takes the UK into borderline unlawful territory with respect to international law anyway, and how migrants are treated. But the point here, the question here is, or let's just, before we get your comments, put this on screen and just remind everybody, we talked about this on Friday, I think last week, the fact that the government is spending £1 billion a year on accommodation for people that the majority of them are coming from Albania. I'm not quite sure, when there's this amount of money being spent on the people that are coming to this country, what this legislation is going to achieve. And my question to you is this a genuine effort by the UK government, do you think, or is this really all about the British Bill of Rights and getting the UK out of human rights obligations that it has internationally?
It's the latter, Mike, and we circle back really to the digital identity issue with which we began this news broadcast, because there again, it's another area that you can properly call constitutional, so significant it is, in which the government decided before the crisis, whether it be Brexit or COVID or migrants, that it wished a new arrangement with fewer immunities for the people, whether they are natives or newcomers, and then decides to make up the policy on the hoof with a post hoc justification. If you are looking at the ECHR obligations from Strasbourg, that treaty, of course, predates the EU, which is often used to tell the British government it's acting unlawfully, or even from the UN level. Strangely enough, the Danish government doesn't have any problem. Just as it did with the EU's justice and the EU's military affairs, it opted out of those whole pillars at some points. So Denmark has managed to get itself treaty opt-outs which allow it to remain within the ECHR and yet refuse to process asylum seekers for Denmark within Denmark. It now uses Rwanda. So what's going on there proves, whichever way you want to look at it politically, that there is a way of honouring international law obligations and tackling the system, tackling the backlog. The backlog, as you've just pointed out there, isn't being tackled, and therefore international law is just a front for what's going on.
Yes, okay, thanks. Now, sticking in the UK then, thanks to Josie for sending this through this morning. I just want to let everybody know about, well, today, of course, International Women's Day. And so the press release about this says that 1950s born women from right across the UK are meeting outside Parliament or at Parliament Square to draw attention to the issue of pensions for women. Now, of course, we are well aware of the protests going on with respect to pensions in France, but this doesn't seem to get quite the coverage. So the women complaining, this is the Women Against State Pension Inequality, talking about the fact that many of them were already 58 years old when the Department of Work and Pensions decided to change the pension rules and make state pension only available for women that are 66 or older. And so anyway, they are now taking this to judicial review. They're protesting today outside Parliament, but they're taking this to judicial review. Apologies, they have already raised the money for this. And so the point is that they've attempted to take this to the Financial Ombudsman, The Ombudsman decided that they had no case, and so they're taking this to judicial review, and hopefully they will, because I mean, at the end of the day, it was absolutely obscene that the rules were changed with basically no notice, and many of these people had made life decisions already, and this completely destroyed those. You know, it was inappropriate that people were only given 2 years' notice.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot more to be said on that.
Okay, if you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org, and you, as a member, would be very welcome, and your membership very much appreciated and needed. You can pick something up at the UK Column shop, but please do share material you find on the various platforms.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, just a reminder that at 1 o'clock tomorrow, we'll be streaming out the interview that I did with Moira Malcolm, also known as Moira Dundee. She'll be talking about the dangers of lockdown, and she has a fascinating story to tell, so I hope people will tune in and watch that. Reminder about Sunday, 22nd of October 2023, AV13. And this is the Leonardo Hotel where it will be held. It's a day event, but if you need accommodation, you have to contact the hotel yourself. And also a reminder that we've got a live streamed AV coming out in April. Actually, the date is the 23rd. I think I said the 22nd yesterday. Apologies for that. So watch out for that. UK Column will be helping with that event as well. Now, we've had some interesting emails come in from UK Column supporters. We are very tight for time today, but just worth giving these a mention. So we've got an email from a UK Column viewer to Damien Collins MP. Dear Mr. Collins, can you tell me if King Charles will be placing his signature at the base of the coronation oath without any redactions, and will he abide by it? I'd also like to know if he'll abide by the common law rights contained in this act. Reply came back, and it said, Dear Mr. Glenn, thank you for your email. I would not presume to speak to the King, but I'm sure that he will do whatever is expected during the coronation, including signing the coronation oath. Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, signed it at the top of the oath rather than at the bottom, though. With respect to statute and common law rights, I'm not sure you entirely understand what these terms mean. Common law is that part of the law which arises from custom and judicial precedent rather than statute. Acts of Parliament create law through statute. I, of course, will always strive to obey the law, and not just because I am a member of Parliament and therefore a lawmaker. Thank you once again for taking the time to write. And Mr. Glenn went back again and he said, Dear Mr. Collins, from your reply, see below, you're a public servant because you took the oath of office. The oath represents loyalty to the King Queen, who represents the rule of law under the Constitution. The King Queen, in turn, have promised to keep the people to govern according to laws and customs, common law, meaning to keep the established rule of law according to the Constitution. This, in turn, means keeping the people's sovereignty. Now, there is more there, but people can freeze the screen. I'm going to pass to you, Alex, if you would, for a very short comment, because we've got quite a bit of material we'd like to move on to.
Common law rights is perhaps not the tightest expression to use, but what has been pointed out now by Mr. Glenn is, of course, completely sound. There was a treaty between the monarch and the people in 1688. It then received statutory form in the Coronation Oath Act. That is the condition on which the Crown is given, and the Crown recognises, and I will say it, although I get a lot of criticism for saying such things, that the common law is anterior and superior to common law. It came before to statute law. It came before and outranks, the very opposite of what Mr. Collins and the whole legal fraternity now claim.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, we need to get educating our politicians. Another email here, a very interesting one, where a lady says, basically, what can I do if my MP is not responding? So Dr. Andrew Murison had been asked about 5G, but he isn't responding to this lady. And so she ends up saying, what can I actually do? Well, the simple reply is to contact the local party chairman and stay on their case, because when the local party chairman understands that people in the constituency, thank you, Mike, when the chairman understands that people are not happy, they very quickly put pressure back on the MP. So target the local party chairman, but once you do it, stay on their case and as always be polite and respectful. We've got another viewer here who's not very happy that has tried to challenge the BBC regarding excess deaths and has simply got the usual BBC fob off saying, didn't we do a good job in reporting all the false information? They didn't quite say that, but you get the meaning. What have you got to do here? You've got to start challenging the individuals running the BBC and not just treating the BBC as an organisation that runs itself. So get onto the BBC board, stay on the case. That's the rule. Now, let's do a quick update on Ukraine. Of course, Bakhmut is still the key issue. And essentially, Bakhmut is encircled. This was our report we had on the news on Monday, where we said that there was confusion because troops were being withdrawn, but Ukrainian troops were also being pushed back into the encirclement. And this situation still seems to be going on, but it's got more complicated because of the interaction between Zelensky and his generals. But I'm going to stress again that we don't know the exact number of troops in Bakhmut and the immediate defensive environment, but the estimates that I have seen that I believe are believable are between 7,000 to 20,000 troops. There are many people pointing towards that higher figure as Zelensky reinforces failure. So a lot of pressure still coming on. You might have seen information about flooded Ukrainian trenches. What the Western press is not telling Western audiences is that the Ukrainians destroyed the dam of a reservoir which is located up to the northwestern edge of Bakhmut, encircled by yellow. When the flood took place, it moved up into these areas, highlighted by the blue arrows, and essentially Ukrainian trenches were flooded because of the freezing conditions at the time. This made them uninhabitable, and so the Ukrainian action themselves caused the flooding of the trenches. But we've got the mail. Horror of the trenches returns to Europe. Ukrainian forces fight in mud. Well, they would do, because actually on many occasions the temperatures have been above average, and so there's been a slight thaw as well. But here is the Daily Mail trying to say that the Russians are simply fighting by sending in waves of troops which are being mown down by the Ukrainians. This is complete and utter lie. The reality is the Russians are doing everything they can to stay out of the city, but kill off the defenders with shelling. So Moscow has sent thousands into the moor of Ukrainian machine guns, with troops charging across a muddy hellscape, strewn with the corpses of their own comrades. This is 180 degrees out, and it should be written as to what's been happening with Ukrainian attacks. This one, I think, is the BBC at its very best. The BBC would have us believe that Russia, the country with the hypersonic missiles which can't be matched in the US or the West, beg your pardon, come back to that, is using entrenching tools to fight in the trenches. Well, the irony is, of course, that these tools were used by Russian forces on the Eastern Front in World War II to great effect, as being very useful in hand-to-hand combat, which is taking place in Ukraine. But BBC would have us believe the Russians are running out of weapons and ammunition and are using these entrenching tools to fight. So here's the Kiev Independent, Ukraine war latest. After Bakhmut, they could go further. Well, that's a pretty educated statement by Zelensky. This picture on screen is of a Ukrainian fighter who's now died. What are the deaths overall? We simply don't know. The figure that I believe is correct or close to being correct is 300,000, but the Western media dare not disclose this because, of course, it would reveal the true disaster that is unfolding for Ukraine in the country at the moment. So here's the Hill reporting, Zelensky vows Ukraine will continue to defend Bakhmut. This is tactical for us. Well, English is not his first language, but this shows that he doesn't understand the battlefield because what is happening is strategic, not tactical. But he says this is tactical for us. We understand that after Bakhmut, they could go further. Well, I think many people realize the Russians are going to go further. They could go on to Kramatorsk, they could go to Slavyansk. It will be an open road for the Russians after Bakhmut to other towns in Ukraine in the Donetsk direction. So here Zelensky is showing that the Western media are utterly lying when the Western press and media says that Bakhmut is not a strategic town. It is, because when it's captured, this is a major breach in defences. Russia needs at least some victory, Zelensky said. If Moscow were to put their little flag atop Bakhmut, it would mobilise their society in order to create this idea there's such a powerful army. But as we showed again on Monday, most of the roads are now controlled by the Russians, and the small back roads that are open are very muddy, and this is very difficult for vehicles to pass safely. And this is the Hill again. And if we have a look at this report, Bakhmut's value is considered symbolic. So here is the Western media trying to reverse the truth. This is a strategic defeat about to be unfold on Ukraine. But basically Western press says, well, it's just symbolic. We've got a comment about the area being a major defence line for the Ukrainian troops, and that is absolutely true. That's what the Russians are saying. And it says down at the end, holding Bakhmut for so long has allowed Ukraine to inflict heavy losses on Russia. The reverse is true. So Russia estimates that Ukraine has lost 11,000 men in Bakhmut in February alone, and that is believed to be a very accurate estimate. And then far from waves of Russians, the opposite is true. Ukrainians are being slaughtered by Russian artillery and bombing attacks. And Zelensky has decided he's going to override his generals who are talking about retreating quite sensibly. He's going to pour more troops into the cauldron, and those troops are going to die, with some of the units losing between 70 and 80% of their strength.
So you're already talking about how the narrative is changing to justify the loss of Bakhmut, and we'll just bring Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, on screen. He was in Jordan on Monday afternoon, and he discussed this. He said that this has been a contested area for several months. The Russians have desperately tried to seize Bakhmut, and over several months they've not made much progress. He said if the Ukrainians decide to reposition in some of the terrain that's west of Bakhmut, I would not view that as an operational or strategic setback. So the fall of Bakhmut won't necessarily mean that the Russians have changed the tide of this fight.
Yeah, this is a lie. This is a complete lie on the West.
Yes. Should we move on to Debi?
We should indeed.
Yes. Okay, Debi, where are we starting?
Would you like to start with trust, perhaps? Because
Yes.
we've spoken about trust quite a lot. And I just thought we'd just take us a second just to pause a minute and look at the word trust. So I went and looked at Psychology Today, and I was struck by this here: trust, or the belief that someone or something can be relied on to do what they say they will, is a key element of social relationships and a foundation for cooperation. Critical for romantic relationships, friendships, interactions between strangers, and social groups on a large scale. And a lack of trust in such scenarios can come with serious consequences. Indeed, society as a whole would likely fail to function in the absence of trust. And I just noticed that trust seems to have been embedded in our psyche. So I just wanted to see what patient experience was like. How much confidence do patients have in clinicians? And I was interested in this report from the Nuffield Trust that was last updated on the 15th of December 2022. And I've screenshot a couple of the graphs. I'd recommend everybody goes and has a look at that report. And Mike, you're the data cruncher, but from my eyes, I can see that although patients' confidence and trust in clinicians comparing across the NHS, and we're comparing across children and young people's, across to maternity services, GP services, although they have decreased a little tiny bit, there's still a remarkable amount of trust in the NHS, is what I'm reading.
Well, I think it's
sorry,
quite
do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say I think it's quite a significant decline. So if we look at 2020, the Children and Young People's Survey in 2020, that was over 80%. So it has declined quite a bit, it seems.
Yeah, hopefully it's on the right way, but it still shows, and I'm still speaking to people that are still trusting their GPs and their clinicians, and often quite rightly so, because they've got very good GPs and clinicians. So we're not saying that they're lying or that we shouldn't trust them, but it's interesting the way that trust has become embedded. And I was interested in this recent speech by Penny Mordaunt called Trust in Britain. Now, it's quite an ambiguous title. And when I read it out to Brian, it was like, well, trust, are we asking everybody else to trust in Britain because Britain's a great place to be? Or are we saying that trust in Britain and the trust within Britain with us is failing a little bit? And one of the little segments that I put on that previous slide, and I think it's important to highlight, is that Penny Mordaunt says, being a government minister, having attended Davos, I am clearly part of this group. I am braced for a post-speech social media pylon as to why I'm an apologist for a global Illuminati hell bent on ending humanity as we know it. Now, she made this speech for the Edelman's UK Trust Barometer only just recently on the 1st of March. Now, the Edelman Institute it's called a trust barometer, but it's actually a PR company, a massive communications company with clients like Nestle and Dow Chemical and Roche, to name but a few. So a massive, massive organization that I hadn't heard of before. So I took a closer look at Penny Mordaunt's speech, and the next few slides, I won't read them all out because I know we're really tight for time. So if you just want to freeze the screen and have a look at some of the segments. She says clearly she's not being paid to attend. And also in the next slide, especially on the right-hand side, please screenshot it and read it. She makes observations about what she's seen in mainstream broadcasts, that the air raids in Ukraine are fake, that controversial traffic calming measures are not the product of an overbearing Lib Dem council, but a global conspiracy to get us all to eat insects. So it's a very interesting speech that I just wanted to signpost people to. And there's one more screenshot. And again, I'll just say, just freeze the screen and just read some of the things that she's been saying. But clearly at the end of her speech, she says, we can tell the difference though, right? With a question mark. And just to end this little segment, I just wanted to give a few examples of where we see the word trust, because I think we see it all over the place, but we're not actually aware of it. Because who are we trusting? We're trusting the Wellcome Trust, really? The World Economic Forum, that came from the World Economic Forum. We're trusting the Office for National Statistics. They want us to trust them. We're trusting the World Health Organization. We're trusting the Prince's Trust. We don't seem to be trusting ourselves. And when we go to financial, we can look and see that we're trusting the World Bank. Trusts, trust has a multitude of meanings. And I'm sure maybe in extra, Alex might like to comment on that. But we're seeing the word trust everywhere. That's also a highlight of Penny Mordaunt's speech. But where else? NHS, trust. And you can see there from Wiki, it's an organisational unit within the National Health Services of England and Wales. So wherever we go, we see trust. And I just noticed as I was walking around my neighbourhood recently, the postbox, because I hadn't noticed that all of a sudden we've got NHS signs supporting the NHS because the Royal Mail want us to have trust in them. Now, they want us to have trust in order to get rapid COVID tests back to them. Now, Why are we seeing this appearing on our post boxes now? Why are we seeing a priority post boxes? Because we're hearing from many people through the column that they are receiving COVID-19 tests. They're being asked to take them and to send them back as a matter of priority. And my question is why? So trust is a word that maybe we should just take a little bit more look of and learn to trust ourselves, learn to trust our own research. Don't trust anyone other than yourself. Which brings me on very quickly to the MHRA board meeting. Always like to put out a shout for Dame June Rain. As you can see, it's being held on Tuesday, the 21st of March, 2023. Please do book your tickets. They're free. It doesn't cost anything. But please bear in mind that when you write questions, they have to, if you're writing a question that you want answered on the day of the board meeting, it has to follow the agenda. So there's just a very quick screenshot of the agenda. So if you want to make full use of your question and ensure that it gets answered at the board meeting, you can see the agency performance, scientific organisation, dynamic organisation and effective governance are on the agenda for this next MHRA board meeting. I'm sorry to say that there isn't anything there on patient safety. Another thing I just wanted to signpost people quickly to was to a BMJ article about nothing about us without us. Now, I've been using this term many times. The autism community use it, but it has been taken from disability rights activists to cover pretty much every area now. So it's a great phrase for everyone to use, because really when we're looking at vaccine injuries and we're looking at the MHRA, clearly nothing about us without us, which was why I was very pleased to see a faculty of pharmaceutical medicine highlighting the fact that they were very pleased that the MHRA were to be congratulated because they were following this nothing about us without us doctrine, and that they had published a new report. Well, it's not really that new actually, but the patient involvement strategy, which is the nothing about us without us, the patient involvement strategy 2021-2025 is a very interesting document that I think everybody should turn their attention to, because particularly it mentions yellow card. It says that the patient involvement strategy will include the awareness of the yellow card scheme. Well, that's interesting because I believe the yellow card scheme is going to be changed to another scheme, Safety Connect. It also says that they want to improve user experience of the yellow card. So my question to those that are vaccine injured is your experience of the yellow card good? Because I don't believe it is, but I think we should all be looking at this document. So thank you for letting me talk about the MHRA. Again, it's still top of my radar, as are vaccine adverse reactions.
Thank you, Debbie. And I guess we'll end with this. And I'm going to be interested in your comments on this, because on Monday, the BBC had an episode of Panorama, as usual, and it was entitled Elon Musk's Twitter Storm. And the wonderful Mariana Spring was hosting it. She published an article on the BBC, Twitter Insiders, that we can't protect users from trolling under Musk. This was subsequent to the Panorama play out. Twitter Insiders have told the BBC that the company is no longer able to protect users from trolling, state-coordinated disinformation, and child sexual exploitation following layoffs and changes under owner Elon Musk. Exclusive academic data plus testimony from Twitter users backs up their allegations, suggesting hate is thriving under Mr. Musk's leadership, with trolls emboldened, harassment intensifying, and a spike in accounts following misogynistic and abusive profiles. And she says that her investigation also reveals concerns that child sexual exploitation is on the rise at Twitter, that targeted harassment campaigns aimed at curbing freedom of expression and foreign influence operations are going undetected, that exclusive data showing how misogynistic online hate targeting her, Mariana Spring, is on the rise since the takeover, and that rape survivors have been targeted by accounts that have become more active since the takeover. So Elon Musk is a very naughty boy, and Mariana Spring had a little bit to say on a BBC newscast podcast. Let's have a listen to this.
Twitter had a really big problem with trolling, but what the Panorama looks at is the work that was being done, the tangible work that employees were doing to protect users from hate, that, according to Twitter's internal research, did appear to be having a positive impact. And when you look at my own online abuse, and that's something we explore in the Panorama, because newscasters may know that I sometimes find myself on the receiving end of trolls for covering disinformation and conspiracies and abuse. We looked into that, and while my online abuse was not very good in 2021, in 2022, it got a lot better across all of the social media sites. And then towards the end of 2022, after Musk took over Twitter, this data, which was analysed by the University of Sheffield and the International Centre for Journalists, shows that my online abuse tripled following the takeover. And that in some ways was the jumping off point for this investigation.
So poor Mariana being abused on Twitter. I'd like to know what her definition of abuse is, but I'm fascinated that the things that she highlights just happen to be exactly the types of things that the government once highlighted in preparation for the online safety bill. But anyway, Debi, I just wonder what your thoughts are on that very briefly.
Well, I hadn't seen that clip, so the length of the microphone seems to be matching the length of her nose. I'm sorry, but that was so obvious. But I did actually see this programme, and I was fascinated because Mariana Spring, it talk about double standards, in my opinion. Mariana Spring couldn't get hold of Elon Musk. She wanted to interview Elon Musk desperately, and he wasn't responding to any of her messages. So she did a Twitter poll on whether people on Twitter would agree that Panorama and Mariana Spring, as disinformation correspondent, should conduct an interview with Elon Musk, as Elon Musk had done, as should he be chief twit, I think it was, he'd done. So she was following his line, and he hasn't replied to her. So my question is, if Mariana Spring is watching, perhaps UK Column should do a poll on Twitter, because I've also asked Mariana Spring many times for an interview to discuss what we know, to share knowledge, and she's not replying to me. So talk about double standards. Do you think we should conduct our own poll on Twitter, perhaps?
We do.
We think this is a really good idea, and we'll keep pushing Ms. Spring to see whether she bounces back, as it were, in order to say yes. But I think the answer will be no.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think we need to leave it there.
We do. Do we want to put an image of the young lady?
Oh, well,
on the
maybe we
screen?
should. Yes, okay. Alex.
Yes, there we are. So Andrew Stribling noticed the phrase trolling state coordinated disinformation in Mariana Spring's reporting. So he got back at her with, thanks for confirming your areas of expertise and experience. Enjoy your day hoovering up all the data for your next hit job, while the rest of us watch UK Column at 1 p.m. for the real news, to which I can only add, I hope you're reading the articles on ukcolumn.org as well, which will have many additions in the coming days, starting, of course, with Debbie Evans's latest blog, which will be up on the comment section as soon as I can manage today.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Well, very big thank you to everybody who's joined us today, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. Your support is greatly appreciated. Of course, if you want to continue with us into extra time, you do need to be a full paid up member of UK Column, so perhaps you might consider that if you're not. But we're going to say thank you to everybody for joining us for the news, and we'll be back for extra time in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.